What would you do if you realized that the mother sobbing for her child in court was the same person who signed away his entire future 8 years ago? This isn't just a story. This is the trial I'm living right now. My name is Jack, and I'm here because people love to say blood is thicker than water. But today, I'm going to prove that sometimes blood is nothing more than a cold-blooded business contract. Look across the room. There she is, Linda. Draped in designer silk, diamonds dripping from her neck, preaching about motherly instinct. Then look at this side. You've got me, a combat vet with scarred hands and a greased-up suit, sitting next to a silent boy with autism. Alex leaned in and whispered just 5 words in my ear. "Let them talk, Dad. Just let them talk." When he leaned over, I caught the scent of crayons and cheap peppermint on his hoodie. The smell of pure innocence trapped in a room that reeks of Linda's expensive perfume and dry, soulless legal papers. Our lawyer is sweating. He thinks we're going to lose. But what they don't know is that the real truth isn't in some legal brief. It's inside that battered sketchbook. Alex is clutching like his life depends on it. Linda thinks she burned every bridge. She thinks she torched every receipt. She was wrong. Paint doesn't lie. When you love a child, you paint in warmth. When you use a child, you paint in ice. And in just a second, you're going to see a different 16-year-old boy dismantle a multi-million-dollar empire of lies with a single stroke of a pen. The truth doesn't need to scream. It just needs to be seen. And today, justice is going to take on a color you never saw coming. Back in the courthouse lobby, the fireplace is roaring, swallowing an old childhood drawing of a family of 3. I can hear Linda's voice from across the room, cold as a winter morning. "Burn it. No one needs to remember things that have no value." Our lawyer slides a file across the scratched oak table. He's moving slow, like he's just been dealt the final hand in a losing game of high-stakes poker. His tie is crooked, and his eyes are bloodshot from zero sleep. "Jack," he mutters, his voice dropping an octave. "If the judge leans into that natural mother's rights argument, we're in deep trouble." I felt the blood drain from my face. Linda is standing there, untouchable. Her black dress fits like a glove, and she's absent-mindedly stroking that diamond necklace. She glances at my thrift store suit and my grease-stained hands, and she doesn't even try to hide the disgust. Next to her is Mike, Alex's biological father. He's rocking a suit that costs more than my truck and checking his Rolex every 10 seconds. He leans over to their hotshot young lawyer, loud enough for me to hear. The hired help really thinks they can keep what doesn't belong to them. The neon lights overhead are buzzing, that sharp electric hum that makes your teeth ache and your nerves want to snap. What would you do if the person who threw their child away like trash suddenly came back to claim everything you spent a lifetime building? A heavy door slams at the end of the hall. The sound is dry and sharp, making the glass partitions rattle. My hands that held a rifle to protect my brothers in arms, hands that spent 8 years hauling freight and fixing rigs, are shaking like I've never seen a day of danger in my life. But across from me, Alex, is a rock. My 16-year-old boy is lanky now, his shoulders hunched as if he's trying to shrink himself down in a world that's always been way too loud for him. But his eyes are still. It's that same deep, soulful gray stare he had when he was 8 years old. Looking out the window of our little coastal cabin, he leans in close. I can smell the peppermint from the gum he chews when he's hyper-focused. "Let them talk, Dad," he says. His voice is steady in a way a kid's voice shouldn't be. Under the flickering neon, Alex slowly unzips his old art bag. He pulls out a weathered, leather-bound sketchbook and places it gently in my trembling palms. It's a drawing, so detailed it's haunting, pencil and watercolor. It shows Linda talking to Mike, clutching a thick envelope right in front of the gates of the Hope Foster Center. In the corner of the frame, there's a tiny little boy curled up on the steps, his face buried in his hands. Underneath the drawing, in tiny, shaky handwriting, it reads, "The day Linda came, the day Mom didn't stay." Alex whispers, his voice thick with fear but hard with resolve, "Dad, I'm scared." But this is the last piece of the puzzle. What I remember, what I saw. For a second, I didn't get what he was hinting at. All I saw was that drawing, raw, unfiltered pain etched into every line. I wanted to grab him by the shoulders and scream, "Talk? Talking is how she threw you away." Talking is how she wove those webs of lies over the phone that night. Talking is how she dumped you at that shelter and never once looked back. But Alex didn't blink. He didn't raise his voice. He sat there like a rock in the middle of a rushing river, letting the currents scream and howl around him, patiently waiting to see where the water would break. My throat tightened. I swallowed hard and looked back at our old lawyer. "What are you saying? That we could actually lose?" He let out a long, heavy breath, rubbing his forehead as if trying to iron out the deep wrinkles there. "Family court around here can be a wild card, Jack. You're the foster father. You've poured blood, sweat, and tears into raising him for 8 years. But when it comes to bloodlines—" "Don't use that word," I snapped, the edge in my voice sharper than I intended. My voice echoed off the empty walls of the lobby, and I immediately hated myself for losing my cool. A few heads turned. Across the room, Linda offered a faint, icy smirk, like she'd just seen exactly what she was waiting for. Alex's fingers gave a sharp twitch on his thigh, then went still again, tracing invisible patterns only he could see. The lawyer raised a hand to calm me down, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I'm not insulting you, Jack. I'm warning you about what's coming. Linda and Mike's legal team, they're going to paint you as a squatter, an outsider who kept a mother from her child, controlling him just to get your hands on the fortune from those famous paintings." My stomach did a slow somersault. I thought back to Linda's face the day she showed up on my porch in the pouring rain, the heavy makeup, the glossy lips, that dramatic, trembling voice. "I just want my son back," she'd said, as if she wasn't the one who called to abandon him, as if she hadn't signed away her rights at an orphanage years ago. Alex's whisper echoed in my head again. "Let them talk, Dad." The lawyer leaned in, his face dead serious. "We need to stay cold, Jack. Ice cold. Let her testify. Let their lawyer spit out those stories. Don't react. Don't interrupt. Don't let them see you angry." I looked at Alex, searching for a sign. "Is that what you want?" Alex gave a single nod, slow, deliberate, and certain. His eyes weren't filled with fear. They held a strange, haunting calm. That's how this war began, right at the peak of the most stressful moment of my life. Right before the judge stepped in. Right before Linda and Mike tried to steal back something they never deserved to own. But what they don't know is that Alex saw something that night that none of us did. A horrific secret buried for 8 years, about to be exposed through the pencil strokes of a kid everyone called broken. And that secret? It's sitting right inside the sketchbook Linda thought she'd burned to ashes. This is the story of that fateful night. 8 years ago, this coastal town reeked of wet asphalt and that biting October wind. The waves out there were roaring, pitch black and violent, while the trees along the coast were shedding leaves like they'd just given up on everything. I remember that night perfectly because my combat boots were still damp while I was driving that long stretch away from home. I was hauling freight for a small-time company for the kind of measly paycheck Linda always looked down on. Back-breaking grunt work that no one notices unless you screw up the cargo. My hands smelled like oil and metal, and my back ached like someone had driven a nail into my spine. It was a stormy night, and I was squinting through the rain on a slick coastal road. My phone buzzed. Battery was dying. I checked the screen. Linda. A bad feeling crawled up my neck. She never called when I was on the night shift. "Linda?" I picked up, trying to hide the exhaustion in my voice. "Everything okay? How's Alex?" The silence on the other end lasted so long, I thought the call had dropped. Then her voice came through, cold and distant, like we'd never shared a roof in our lives. "Jack, I'm calling to tell you, I'm filing for divorce." My hand gripped the steering wheel so hard the knuckles turned white. The truck hydroplaned slightly. "What? Linda, what are you talking about?" I think I was pretty clear. Her voice was flat, like she was reading a death certificate. "I can't do this anymore. I need a different life." "Different?" I struggled to keep the rig straight, my head spinning. "Linda, we can talk when I get home. I'm driving." "There's nothing to talk about." She cut me off, her tone hardening. "I've made my decision. I'm leaving with someone who can actually give me the life I deserve. Someone with money." A phantom fist slammed into my chest. "And Alex?" I asked. I heard a suitcase zipper snap shut over the phone, punctuated by the impatient honk of a taxi waiting outside our door and the sharp click of a lighter as she took a long drag of a cigarette. "Because of him," Exactly. Jack, do you honestly think I can keep being a mother to a broken child like that? Like what? I snapped, my voice shaking with pure rage. You're talking about your own son, Linda. I know exactly what I'm saying. Her voice was colder than the ocean spray hitting my windshield. The autism, the therapy, the never-ending doctor appointments. I didn't sign up for a life like this, Jack. You didn't sign up to be a mother to your son? I screamed, finally losing my grip. Don't you dare get all high and mighty with me, she fired back. You think you're some hero? You're a washed-up vet working as a freight hauler. What do you have to offer him? Debt? That shack of a house that's falling apart? Tears blurred my vision. I had to slow down and pull over to the shoulder. Where's Alex? Where is he? He's perfectly safe. Linda's tone shifted to a terrifyingly calm level. I dropped him off at Hope Center. My heart stopped. What? An orphanage? Linda, you can't. I already did, she cut me off. Jack, the kid is a drag. My life can't be anchored down by a child who needs more than I have to give. You abandoned your own son? My voice was trembling. I couldn't believe my ears. You dump Alex at a shelter and call to tell me like you're just canceling an Amazon order? My hands gripped the wheel until my knuckles turned white. I grabbed an empty soda can from the passenger seat and crushed it. The sound of screeching metal filled the cab, drowning out the rain hammering the glass. My breath felt like fire. Don't be so dramatic, Linda sighed. He'll be better off there. They've already found a wealthy family interested in adopting. They have money, resources. Not like us. Not like me, you mean? My voice cracked. Exactly. She didn't hesitate for a second. And you know what? I kissed him on the head before I left tonight. He didn't even cry. He just sat there, staring into space like I wasn't even there. Maybe he doesn't even care. Do you know why? I said, the fury finally boiling over. Because he's watched you walk away too many times. He's used to you disappearing. Think whatever you want. Linda's voice sounded distant now. Listen, Jack, don't look for him. You hear me? Don't look. Because he doesn't want to see a failure of a father like you anyway. I'm not even his father. I screamed, desperate. You can't just dump this responsibility on me like this. But you're the only one who ever gave a damn, said Tham, she softly, almost honest for once. You're patient. You know how to handle him. You're you. And I'm just not. Linda, my voice broke in half. I'm sorry, Jack. I have to live my life. I'm still young. I'm not spending the rest of my years in waiting rooms and nightmare parent-teacher conferences. I deserve more than this. And Alex, doesn't he deserve a mother? Silence. Then, he'll be fine. And so will you. Don't call me again. The click of the hang-up felt like a gunshot. I sat frozen in the truck cab, the screen flashing call ended. Rain pounded the windshield, a relentless flood, as if the sky itself was weeping for me. My hands shaking, I reached for my old wallet on the dashboard. Inside was the drawing Alex sent me that morning. A crayon picture of the three of us holding hands. Under the dim cab light, I saw the tiny, trembling words in the corner for the first time. Dad, come home soon. I lost it. Tears hit the drawing, blending with the rain on the glass. I clutched that paper to my chest, my whole body shivering like I was freezing to death in the middle of winter. Can you believe a mother could discard her child just because he was too much trouble? Stay with me, because what Jack finds at Hope Center will leave you speechless. I don't know how long I sat there. Maybe 10 minutes, maybe an hour. The engine was still humming, the rain was still falling, but all I could hear was Linda's voice. Don't look. I looked down at my rough, grease-stained hands. Hands that had held a rifle to protect my brothers, now shaking with total helplessness. I asked myself, what can I do? A jobless vet with a mountain of debt. How can I raise a child with autism? But then I looked back at the drawing. 3 people holding hands. Alex had put me there, standing next to him, holding him tight. I cranked the engine and pulled a U-turn. I wasn't going home. I was going straight to Hope Center. By the time I rushed into the center, the sun was almost up. A light drizzle turned the whole grounds into a depressing shade of gray. The staff member, a middle-aged woman with a tired face, looked at me like I was a lunatic. You can't see the boy now, she said. It's after hours, and he's not doing well. I'm his stepfather, I said, my voice hoarse. I need to see Alex. Sir, according to the files, you have no legal guardianship, she shook her head. And we already have a wealthy family interested in adopting him. They're coming to meet him this afternoon. My chest tightened. Please, just 5 minutes. That's all I need. The woman looked at me, her eyes softening. He's taking it hard. He hasn't said a word since last night. He just sits there, clutching that art kit you gave him. My heart skipped a beat. Where is he? She hesitated, then pointed toward the back shed. He's been hiding in there all morning. We were going to give him some space before the meeting. I ran to the shed and threw open the creaky wooden door. It was pitch black inside, save for a few slivers of light cutting through a tiny window. The air was thick with the smell of damp wood and moldy dust. Alex, I called out softly. In the shadows, I saw a small silhouette huddled in the corner. Alex was sitting there, his face streaked with dirt, eyes bloodshot but not a single tear falling. He was hugging that art kit, the birthday gift I'd scraped together for him last year, like a shield. Alex? My voice cracked. He looked up at me. There was no shock in his eyes, like he knew I was coming all along. Without a word, he stood up, walked over, and pressed a crumpled piece of paper into my hand. I smoothed it out. It was a drawing of a soldier carrying a little boy through a wall of fire. At the top, in messy, jagged letters, it said, "Dad's home." Tears hit the paper before I could stop them. I dropped to my knees and pulled him into a bear hug. Alex didn't cry, he didn't scream, he just leaned his head on my shoulder and let out a long, shaky breath, like he finally had permission to rest. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I'm so late." He gave a tiny shake of his head, his voice rasping. "No, you're right on time." I don't know why, but those words were the clincher. Right then, in that musty shed, I made a vow to myself. No matter what it costs, I am never letting this kid be alone again. I tracked down the staff and started the legal adoption process. It was a brutal marathon of paperwork, interviews, and judgmental looks from the community. But I pushed through. Because Alex deserved a home, and I deserved to be the one to give it to him. Before we left the center for good, I pulled over by a deserted stretch of beach. We sat in silence on the damp sand. The sunrise was just starting to peek over the horizon, painting the ocean in a pale, dusty orange. Without thinking, I picked up a pebble and started doodling in the wet sand. A simple house. Alex watched me, then quietly picked up another stone and drew a heart circling my house. "Our home," he whispered. I just nodded, my throat too tight to speak. That was our first language, no words, just ink and stone. From that moment on, my life took a turn I never saw coming. The next morning, I called out of my early shift and drove Alex to school. He sat in the passenger seat, hands buried deep in his sleeves, staring straight ahead like he was trying to find a fixed point on the horizon. The truck's heater blasted warm, dusty air. Neither of us knew what to say, so we just let the silence sit between us. When I dropped him off, his teacher pulled me aside. Her face was clouded with worry. "We need to talk about Alex's evaluation," she said gently, "about the autism diagnosis and what comes next." I nodded like I actually knew what she was talking about, but I didn't. The word autism just echoed in my head like a sentence I didn't know how to read yet. The weeks after Linda left were a blur of gray. Constant doctor visits, stacks of paperwork that seemed to multiply overnight, and bills that piled up faster than I could pay them. I spent my lunch breaks on hold with insurance companies, only to hear, "Your case needs more documentation, sir." I spent my nights reading pamphlets on autism until the words danced in front of my eyes. Spectrum disorder, early intervention, behavioral therapy. The phrases looped in my mind until they lost all meaning. At church, I started sitting in the very back row. Not because I was looking for God, but because I didn't want anyone to start asking questions. I didn't want to hear, "Where's your wife?" or "Why do you look so burned out?" But one Sunday, an elderly woman named Rosa, who always smelled like peppermint and wore a coat older than both of us combined, sat down next to me. She didn't ask a thing. She just pressed a small scrap of paper into my hand. "Support group," she whispered. "Tuesday night at the community center. The coffee is absolute trash, but the people are kind. They get it." I went, mostly because I didn't know what else to do. That Tuesday, I walked into a room that reeked of burnt coffee and lemon bleach. Folding chairs were set in a circle, and a box of donuts sat there, looking like it had been through a war. There were parents who looked like they hadn't slept in years. Dark circles under their eyes, shoulders slumped under an invisible weight. A grandfather raising his grandson after his son passed. A mother with a notebook thick with therapy schedules, every page crammed with appointments. I sat down and stayed quiet, trying to be invisible. But when it was my turn, the moderator, a gray-haired guy with a soft smile, nodded my way. "Do you want to share?" And the words just poured out of me like a dam breaking. "I'm Jack. My wife just left, walked out on me and her own son, and I'm trying to raise him, but I have no idea what the hell I'm doing." Nobody gasped, nobody judged. They just nodded like they'd heard this brand of pain 1,000 times before. Like everyone in that room had their own version of the same story. "How old is he?" one mother asked. 8, I replied, "and just diagnosed as autistic." "Welcome to the club," another dad said. His voice wasn't sarcastic, it was genuinely warm. "We didn't choose to be here, but we're in this together." After the meeting, a guy in a Vietnam vet hat named Tommy clapped me on the shoulder. He was rugged, silver beard, sandpaper hands, but he had eyes that had seen it all. "You got a VFW card, son?" he asked. "I've been out a while, but I never joined a post," I told him. "Doesn't matter," he said, handing me a scrap of paper with an address. "We meet every Friday night. There's coffee, and there are old-timers who know how to fix everything from a busted engine to a leaky faucet. Sometimes that's all a man needs, knowing he doesn't have to face the music alone." That was the start of my Friday nights at the vet support station. I'd bring Alex along, and he'd sit quietly at a corner table with a plate of fries and a stack of drawing paper. Meanwhile, I'd listen to the roar of old men arguing over a baseball game like it was life or death, or swapping tips on how to tune a carburetor on a vintage Mustang. One night, Tommy leaned in close. His voice went dead serious. "Jack, listen to me. Keep everything. Every receipt, every letter, every damn email, every scrap of paper connected to that boy." I looked at him, confused. "Why?" "Because one day she might come back," Tommy said, his eyes drifting away like he was haunted by a ghost. "And when she does, you need to prove you were here, that you did the work. Even the stuff your kid draws, that's your evidence of love." He paused, then added, "I lost my case because I didn't have the paper trail, Jack. Lost my grandson. Don't let that happen to you." At the time, I didn't get why that advice was such a big deal, but I listened, because when your world is crumbling and you don't know which way is north, you cling to any advice that feels solid, especially from someone who's already walked through the fire. And that's exactly what I did for the next 8 years. I stayed. Not because I was some hero or because I was brave. I stayed because I couldn't imagine walking away. Every morning I'd wake up, see that kid curled up in his bed, and I knew, if I wasn't there, there was nobody. I learned Alex's rhythm. Every tiny detail. The way his socks had to be folded just right. No wrinkles, no bunching, or he couldn't put them on. The way the noise in a grocery store made his shoulders lock up, his hands start to shake, and his eyes wander off to some distant point, just to escape the now. The way he'd calm down if we just sat in the truck for 5 minutes, windows cracked, listening to the engine idle. That steady hum was like a lullaby for his frayed nerves. I learned how to talk to him without the pressure, not torture. "How are you feeling?" But, "Want to hear some music?" I learned how to give him space without letting him drift too far, always letting him know I was right there if he decided to look back. And slowly, he started to grow. He wasn't the kind of kid to crack jokes at the dinner table or play catch in the yard. He was a watcher. He saw everything with those deep, silent eyes. He memorized dates. Today is Tuesday the 15th, and color patterns. The sky is 70% gray today, 30% blue. While I thought I was the one barely treading water, drowning in bills and debt, he was quietly building a raft out of the smallest details, his sketches, his strokes, his observations of the world. I didn't see it back then. I only saw my own exhaustion, the fear that I wasn't enough, the anger toward Linda, anger that never really went out, just simmered like red coals under the ash. And when Alex hit 16, when his talent for painting suddenly blew up and turned into contracts worth 6 figures, that anger roared back to life in a whole new form. Because money doesn't just buy comfort, it buys attention. And the kind of people who abandoned you, they have a nose for attention, like sharks have a nose for blood in the water. Linda and Mike's move was surgical. Before they ever showed their faces, Linda started secretly sending Alex expensive gifts and a fake family photo album. Their first public move? They coincidentally showed up at one of Alex's art auctions, outbidding everyone just to get noticed. They weren't pushy, they just watched him from a distance, playing the long game to build sympathy. Linda only approached once she'd sparked his curiosity, using the word mom like it was the most natural, gentle thing in the world. I didn't buy it for a second. I asked Tommy to do some digging. What he found was exactly what I feared. They were drowning in debt, and he intercepted emails discussing their plan to reclaim Alex the second his success hit the papers. So when Linda showed up again, this time in the pouring rain, with a high-priced lawyer and a smile that didn't even touch her eyes, my first instinct wasn't revenge. It was pure, unadulterated panic. Linda and Mike filed for custody, preaching that blood is everything. And for a minute, I let my soldier's brain get the better of me. I thought about the greater good. I thought their money could give Alex a life I couldn't. It broke me, but I almost let him go. I spent nights pacing the shoreline, haunted by the thought that I was failing him by letting him stay with a grease monkey like me. But then, I found out the truth. One night, I was standing outside their new mansion, and I heard it. The screaming. They were pushing Alex like a machine, forcing him to paint non-stop just to flip his work for cash. They didn't want a son, they wanted an ATM. I went back to my old scout roots. I slipped into that house and caught it all on record. Not just the exploitation, but Linda's sick psychological games. I heard her tell him, "Dad, Jack only kept you out of pity. I'm the only one who actually knows what you're worth." That was the spark. That hit my pride and my protective instincts like a gallon of gasoline. I wasn't just hurt anymore, I was dangerous. I was getting my son back. And in a secret message, Alex made his choice. He showed me a photo he'd kept hidden since the orphanage, a blurry shot of Linda walking away with a suitcase, while a tiny Alex reached out for her. She didn't even look back. He whispered to me, "Only your love is real, Dad. They're my blood." But they never gave me love. Now they're just back for the money. Then he told me about the sketchbook, the place where he recorded every traumatic memory of his real mother. It was an emotional crime scene, painted in pain. Now, sitting in this hallway under the buzzing neon lights, touching the scratches on the oak table, I hear my lawyer say we might lose. And my stomach drops because I realize something terrifying. I spent 8 years staying. But I never prepared for a war. But Alex was born for this, and all he asked of me was one thing. Let her talk, Dad. Are you wondering why a 16-year-old is this confident against his evil mother? The secret is in the paintings. Linda thought she turned to ash. The first time Alex ran out of paint, it happened in total silence. No noise, no complaining. Just a row of crushed, bone-dry tubes and an empty palette that he'd tried to scrape clean with a knife until there was nothing left but flakes. It was a Tuesday night in February. The snow was piled high along the coast in gray, slushy heaps, and our old heater was rattling like it was about to give up the ghost. I was at the kitchen table, trying to make sense of a budget that never balanced, while Alex sat across from me, shoulders hunched, eyes locked on an unfinished canvas. He squeezed a tube of ultramarine blue one last time. Nothing. He froze. No panic, no anger. Just stillness, like the world had stopped in the middle of a sentence. "Hey," I asked gently, "what's up?" He swallowed hard. "It won't come out anymore." I leaned over, squinting at those tubes like that would somehow help. "Maybe it just needs a little thinner?" "I already tried," he said, his voice a bit sharper than usual. Then he caught himself. "I'm sorry." "It's okay," I said quickly. "We'll figure it out." But when I opened the old wooden box holding his supplies, my heart sank. Everything inside was a patchwork of junk, brushes losing their hair and fragile hopes. It was a cheap set I'd bought at a thrift store 2 years ago with money from an envelope marked emergency use only. "Can we save it, Dad?" he asked. I hesitated for just 1 second too long. Alex always notices. "Yeah," I answered anyway. "Definitely." That night, after he went to bed, I sat at the table with those empty tubes and ragged brushes laid out like patients on an operating table. The kitchen reeked of turpentine and dry dust. I rubbed my eyes staring at the stained palette. I didn't have the money for a new set, not even half of one. So the next day, I used my lunch break at the docks and headed down to the scrapyard behind the maintenance shop. The place where old wooden crates and mechanical junk go to die. Tommy, my supervisor, sighed when he caught me digging through the scrap bin. "What are you looking for, Jack?" "Anything with color," I said. "It's a long story." "Take whatever you want," he muttered, shaking his head. "Just don't let the big boss catch you." That night, I came home smelling like grease and exhaust. Alex stood in the doorway, watching me spread out old watercolor cakes and leftover jars of industrial paint on the kitchen table. "You don't have to do this, Dad," he said softly. "I have to," I replied. "Now, sit down." For 3 hours we worked in total silence, the only sounds being the ticking of the wall clock and the low rumble of trucks passing outside. I mixed the pigments and he watched. Suddenly, he pointed a finger. "That one needs a bit of white to get the ocean right." I followed his lead. The kid was spot on. When the last of the colors were mixed fresh, vibrant, and alive, he let out a breath I didn't realize he'd been holding. "Thanks, Dad." That was the first time I truly understood. Alex didn't just paint. He saw the entire world through a lens of color. Back then, his paintings didn't even have titles. They were just half-finished sheets and sketches taped to the wall with blue painter's tape. Alex would come home from school, eat the exact same peanut butter sandwich every single day, and disappear into his corner. Sometimes I heard nothing but the scratch of a brush. Other times I heard him pacing, counting under his breath. 1, 2, 3, 4. "What are you working on?" I asked once, leaning against the doorframe. "A way to make the grocery store less loud," he said. I frowned. "You're drawing headphones?" "No, Dad," he answered patiently. "It's color patterns." He explained it slowly, like he was afraid I'd get lost. His paintings broke down massive, chaotic places, bookstores, schools, bus stations, into visual pathways with soft, soothing tones. A way to know what was coming so the noise wouldn't hijack his brain. I didn't know a thing about art theory, but I understood his need for peace. I'd seen him have a meltdown in the cereal aisle when a kid screamed a row over. I'd seen his hands shake when the neon lights buzzed too loud. If these paintings could help him, maybe they could help someone else. The first time he tried to show his work to anyone outside the house was at a small exhibit at the local library. Folding tables, coffee in styrofoam cups. Half the people there looked like they'd wandered in by mistake. Alex stood behind the table, eyes glued to the floor. "You want me to talk for you?" I asked. He shook his head. "I got it." He cleared his throat. "This is, a visual navigation tool for people with sensory overload." Right in the middle of his intro, the library lights flickered and died, plunging the room into darkness. My stomach did a flip. Alex stood frozen, his breathing getting fast and shallow. His fingers twitched, then stopped. Quietly, he started packing up his paintings. "I'm sorry," he said. "It's not working." "It's okay, honey," a kind-looking woman said. "Just a technical glitch." But I could see it on his face, the crushing disappointment, the way he braced himself like he was waiting for an impact. That night, he didn't touch a brush. 2 weeks went by, then 3. One night, I found him sitting on his bed, just staring at his hands. "You giving up?" I asked softly. He shrugged. "Maybe it's just stupid." "No," I said, firm as a rock. "It's not." He looked up. "How do you know?" I thought about the nights I came home exhausted, my back screaming take, my hands raw from chemicals, but still cooking dinner because someone needed me. "Because stupid things don't help people," I said. "And these paintings, they're saving you." The next morning, I made a decision that scared even me. I sold my truck, a 2004 Ford F-150 with rusted wheel wells and a cracked dashboard, but an engine that ran like a clock. It had hauled lumber, gear, and countless loads of groceries for years. I sold it for way less than it was worth, just to buy Alex a professional art kit and the high-end paper that doesn't warp when it hits the water. When I handed them to him, he looked at me like I'd just given him the moon. "You need that truck, Dad," he said. "I can walk," I replied. "But the time we have and the talent you've got, there's no replacement for that." He hugged me, an awkward, brief hug, but it was real. Everything shifted fast after that. Not overnight, and not like some flashy movie montage, but enough to feel the change. Alex refined his style, named his collection Symmetry, and entered a small statewide competition. Do you know what it feels like to sacrifice the thing you value most, just for a slim chance for the person you love? Drop a comment if you've ever been a Jack in real life. Alex didn't take first place, but he caught the eyes of the pros. A month later, the state's biggest paper ran a short piece on page 4. The autistic painting prodigy and the journey to decode the sensory world. I carefully clipped that paper and taped it to the fridge. Then the emails started hitting. Then the phone calls. Finally, a meeting at a riverside cafe where a guy in a sharp suit talked about brand value and market explosions like he was ordering lunch. When the figure, $850,000, was put on the table for his debut collection, I felt dizzy. Alex just gave a silent nod. We didn't throw a massive party. Instead, we found a lawyer, a calm, older guy who wore the same frayed brown suit every time we met. He talked about financial protection structures and dropped a line I'll never forget. Money doesn't change people, Jack. It just strips their real faces bare. That night, I opened a new folder and used a black marker to write on the label, Alex, all documents. I didn't know yet that this folder would become the most important thing I ever owned. Because a week later, an overnight letter arrived, not from an investor, but from Linda. Linda didn't even knock the first time she came back. She stood on my porch in the rain like she owned the place, like she'd just stepped out for a smoke and finally decided to come back inside. Her hair was darker than I remembered. Her coat was spotless and looked incredibly expensive, the kind of coat you don't wear unless you want people to notice. I opened the door and the cold rushed in, carrying the smell of wet asphalt and salty sea air. Jack, she said softly. Hey, can we talk for a minute? Behind me, I felt my son's presence before I heard a sound. Alex's bedroom door creaked, opening just a crack. I think we've said enough for a lifetime, I replied. Linda glanced over my shoulder into the house, her eyes moving fast, like she was measuring and calculating. I just want to see my son. He's not a pet, I said. You can't just drop by when the mood strikes. Her jaw tightened. I'm his mother. That word hit my ears like a hammer blow. I stepped out onto the porch and pulled the door shut behind me. The rain soaked through my jacket and the cold immediately grabbed my spine. It's been 8 years, I said quietly. You don't get to use that word like it's brand new. Linda sighed and looked away like facing me was exhausting her. I wasn't in a good place back then. You weren't in any place, I snapped. You were gone. I left because I felt like I was drowning, she fired back. Do you have any idea what it's like being stuck in a house with a child who— Stop! I cut her off, sharp as a blade, my hands curling into fists. Don't you dare finish that sentence. She pursed her lips, then softened her voice again. I'm better now. I've put in so much work to better myself. I almost laughed. Behind that door I couldn't hear a sound. That silence scared me more than any noise ever could. You don't better yourself by abandoning your child, I said. You don't get to show up now and pretend this is some healing journey. Linda's eyes hardened. I'm not pretending. I'm just reclaiming what belongs to me. There it was. The mask slipped and the predator peeked through. I opened the door and walked inside without a word. Linda hesitated for a split second before following me, shaking the rain off her coat as if she were moving in for good. Alex was standing in the hallway, half hidden by the shadows, his face pale but completely unreadable. Hi, sweetie, Linda forced a smile. You've grown so much. Alex didn't say a word. His eyes flicked from her face to the floor and stayed there. Linda cleared her throat. I've thought about you a lot. That's rich, I said. Funny how we never heard a peep from you. She waved me off. Jack, please. I didn't come here to fight. No, I said, you came here to scavenge. Her eyes drifted toward the kitchen, the hallway, and then locked onto the fridge, specifically the newspaper clipping taped there. Her gaze sharpened. What's that? She asked. None of your business, I replied. A slow, thin smile spread across her face. That looks an awful lot like my son's name. My chest tightened. I could feel the shift. The exact second curiosity mutated into a financial calculation. I should go, she finally said, backing toward the door. But I'll be in touch. No, I said. You won't. She froze at the threshold and looked back at Alex. I miss you, she whispered. Alex didn't move. The door clicked shut, and the sound of the rain swallowed her footsteps. I leaned my forehead against the doorframe, my heart hammering so hard my ears were ringing. Behind me, Alex spoke, his voice flat and clinical. She's lying. I turned around. You sure? He nodded. Her breathing changed. When she talks about feelings, she sounds like she's reading a spreadsheet. Fast. But when she talks about what she wants, her breathing is perfectly calm. A chill ran down my spine. The letter from her lawyer arrived 3 days later. It was formal, polite, and absolutely lethal. Miss Whitmore wishes to re-establish a relationship with her son and resolve certain financial matters regarding his recent business ventures. My hands shook as I read it. The words blurred. Financial matters. I called the lawyer and sat across from him in that small room smelling of dust and burnt coffee. He read the letter twice and leaned back in his chair. "She's going for control of the assets," he said. "Can she do that?" I asked. He hesitated. That hesitation was scarier than any answer. "You're the foster father," he said carefully. "Morally and legally, you've done everything right. But this is complicated." I swallowed hard. "Talk to me." "If the judge prioritizes the biological bloodline," he said, "we could lose decision-making power over Alex's trust funds. Maybe not all of it, but enough for her to manipulate." My stomach turned over. After everything we'd been through, he spread his hands. "Family court doesn't always reward sacrifice, Jack, especially the sacrifices that aren't documented." That night, sleep was a ghost. I lay in bed watching the ceiling fan spin, every creak in the house sounding like a gunshot. I imagined the judge's gavel coming down. I imagined Alex being forced to see her. I imagined her hands on money she never broke a sweat for. I dreamed of her smiling while everything I built turned to ash. Do you feel the rage when someone who never cared for a child tries to steal their talent? Stay tuned, because this legal battle is just starting and Jack isn't backing down. When dawn broke, my hands were cold and numb. Alex was sitting at the kitchen table, systematically organizing a mountain of papers and old sketches. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Organizing everything," he replied. "For what?" He looked up at me, his eyes hauntingly calm and certain. "For the trial." My chest constricted. "Alex, this isn't on you. This is grown-up stuff." He tilted his head slightly. "I'm almost a grown-up, Dad." "That's not what I meant." He pushed a stack of documents toward me. Printed emails, meticulously hand-copied voicemail transcripts, dates, times, and locations. Everything was categorized and numbered with terrifying precision. "You kept all of this?" I asked, stunned. "Yes." "Why?" He paused, choosing his words like they were precious stones. "Because 8 years ago she said one thing: 'Don't call me again unless there's money involved.'" My breath hitched. I remembered. A tiny detail I'd tried to bury just flashed back like a prophecy. I sank into my chair. Linda didn't just abandon the kid, she taught him a brutal lesson. People eventually tell the truth if you let them talk long enough. Suddenly, Alex's whisper in court, "Just let her talk, Dad," became terrifyingly clear. I didn't want to believe my 16-year-old had been prepping for this war longer than I had. It hit my pride in a way I never saw coming. That night, we sat at the kitchen table, the exact same table where Linda packed her bags and bolted like she was rushing for a flight. The overhead light flickered, a nagging fix I'd been putting off forever. Between us sat a stack of folders, faded yellow, labeled in Alex's neat, careful handwriting. Dates, names, events. "This one," he said, sliding a folder toward me, "is the emails." I opened it. Printed messages, single-spaced, highlighted in bright yellow. Some were short, some were ruthless in their finality. "I can't handle this right now. Please stop contacting me." "You chose this path, Jack." My chest throbbed. I didn't even remember half of them. Not because they didn't happen, but because I'd buried them so deep. I'd convinced myself Linda had simply evaporated. "And this," Alex continued, tapping another folder, "is the transcript of calls and voicemails." "You transcribed these yourself?" I asked. "Yeah," he said. "The audio on the tapes gets fuzzy. It'll be easier for the court to read." I picked up a random sheet. October 22nd, 2016, 3:37 p.m. Linda Whitmore. "I don't want this responsibility. Don't call me again." I closed my eyes. All those years I thought I was protecting Alex by never mentioning her, by keeping her voice away from him. Turns out, he heard everything. And he recorded it with haunting precision. "You shouldn't have had to do this," I whispered. Alex just shrugged. I didn't mind. That sentence scared me. It showed he'd learned to rely on no one very early on. He'd built his own fortress out of the truth. The next few weeks were a blur of meetings and calls that always ended with, "Let's see what the judge says." Linda's lawyer was slick, young, confident. He spoke in this calm, reassuring tone, like this was just a little misunderstanding that could be smoothed over with some paperwork. And Linda? She played the grieving mother perfectly. When we bumped into her at the pretrial conference, she was wearing a soft sweater, no jewelry. She looked tired, fragile. "I just want what's best for my son," she said, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. I felt my fists clench under the table. Alex sat next to me, fingers interlaced, staring at the carpet. Linda's lawyer smiled at him. "Alex, we are so proud of what you've achieved. Your mother has been watching your journey from afar this whole time." Alex looked up. "No," he said. The room went dead silent. "No?" the lawyer repeated, the smile frozen on his face. "She wasn't watching," Alex said flatly. "If she was, she'd know my paintings aren't a hobby. She'd know they are how I survive." Linda stiffened. "They are therapeutic works recognized by hospitals and schools," Alex continued, his voice steady. "They help people like me. Please don't devalue them." The lawyer blinked. I had to bite my lip to keep from laughing. Alex's cold clarity was a weapon more lethal than any insult. Later, out in the parking lot, I pulled Alex aside. "You okay?" He nodded. "She talks too much." "What do you mean?" "She's always trying to explain things no one asked about," he said. "People telling the truth don't do that." I stared at him. He wasn't angry. He wasn't seeking revenge. He was just observing a pattern. A scientist analyzing an experiment. But as it turned out, I was the one who almost blew everything. It happened on a Friday night at the VFW post. The air was thick with the smell of grease and strong coffee. Tommy pushed a cup of coffee toward me and shook his head. "She's got some nerve. You should have made that formal adoption paperwork airtight from day one." "I know," I muttered. "You could go public with this," another guy chimed in. "Social media would tear her to pieces in an instant." For a split second, the idea tempted me. Post those emails, release the voicemail transcripts. Let the whole town see who Linda really was. The thought was sweet, like a sugar-coated bullet. I went home, my phone already in my hand. Alex was sitting at his drawing table. Seeing my face, he already knew. "You're thinking about posting something," I admitted. He slowly set down his brush and turned to look at me. "That would be a mistake," he said. I braced myself. "She's dragging us to court." "Correct," he agreed. "And there are rules to that game." I let out a sharp breath. I'm tired of rules. Alex stood up, walked over, and looked me dead in the eye. "Dad," he used the word, rarely, solemnly, and with full intent. "Data, or my drawings, only have value when they are clean, unpolluted by emotion." That word "dad" hit harder than anything Linda's lawyer had ever said. I lowered my phone. That night, I lay awake listening to the sea wind whistle through the doorframe, realizing I had almost let my rage burn down the very life raft we had, our legal and moral integrity. 2 days before the hearing, Linda filed an emergency motion. My lawyer called me while I was at the docks. "They're trying to fast-track the proceedings." My hands went cold. "Is that bad?" "It's pressure," he said. "They want to knock us off balance." I drove home in a mental fog, convinced this was the moment everything would collapse. Alex met me at the door. "It's fine, Dad," he said before I could speak. "How do you know?" "They're rushing," he replied. "That means they're guessing. They don't have solid evidence, so they're using speed as a substitute." I slumped onto the sofa. What if the judge sides with her anyway? Alex thought for a moment. Then he said something I will never forget. "Then we still have the truth. And the truth is always patient." For the first time since Linda had returned, I felt something in my chest actually loosen. It wasn't blind hope, but an extraordinary calm, transmitted from the certainty of my 16-year-old son. Do you believe in the power of patience when facing sophisticated lies? Like this, if you stand with Jack and Alex in this final battle. I still didn't know how it would end, but I knew one thing for sure. Linda was walking into that courtroom with stories, while Alex was walking in with ironclad evidence. And all I had to do, the hardest thing I'd ever done in my life, was keep my mouth shut. The coastal town courtroom always carried a faint scent of old paper and wood floor cleaner. That morning, it was thick with sweat and tension. The room was packed by the time we walked in. Familiar faces from the area, a few people from the local autism support group, and Tommy, my veteran buddy, sitting in the back row with his arms crossed like a sentry. News travels fast in a small town, especially when money and blood get tangled up. Linda sat at the opposing table, her back ramrod straight, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Beside her, Mike, Alex's biological father, occasionally stroked the expensive watch on his wrist, his gaze full of contempt when he looked at us. Their lawyer leaned in close, whispering something that made Linda give a well-timed nod. They looked calm, in control, as if they belonged there. I, on the other hand, was not calm. My knees kept shaking under the table. My palms were drenched in sweat. Every creak of the wooden benches sounded like thunder in my ears. I could only think of one sentence. I am not his biological father. Those words looped in my head like a bad song I couldn't turn off. The judge entered. We stood, then sat. The gavel hit the desk. Thud, echoing through the room and striking right at my chest. Linda's lawyer spoke first. He walked slowly, his voice as smooth as a well-told emotional story. He painted a calculated picture. A mother who had made a mistake. A woman who had struggled with mental health. A parent pushed aside while her son's career flourished without her. My client only wants what is best for her child, he said with fake sincerity, and she believes she should have a voice in the decisions regarding his future. At first, the atmosphere tilted in their favor. The female judge nodded slightly, stating, "Motherhood is an instinct. I believe everyone deserves a second chance." My face went pale. Mike smirked, a triumphant glint in his eyes. He leaned toward his lawyer, whispering loud enough for me to hear, "The poor and rough environment of a veteran is stifling my son's genius." Linda was called to the stand. She stepped up, every movement carefully calculated. She spoke softly, cautiously, about being lost and her journey to find her way back. "I never stopped loving my son," she said, her voice trembling at just the right moment. I thought giving him space was the right thing to do. I almost bolted upright. Heat rose in my chest and curses sat ready to burst from my throat. But I didn't move. I remembered my son's whisper. "Just let her talk, Dad." Linda began talking about birthdays, school, and therapy sessions. But the details were messy and vague. She got Alex's birthday wrong. She misnamed the school he was attending. She spoke of therapies, but couldn't describe a single specific detail. Her lawyer constantly steered her, trying to keep everything safe. Then, it was our turn. My lawyer stood up, adjusting his glasses. He didn't rush. He didn't raise his voice. He asked one simple question. "Miss Whitmore, when was the last time you attended a psychological therapy session with Alex?" Linda blinked. It's been a while." "How long?" "A few years." "Can you be more specific?" She fidgeted in her seat. "I don't remember the exact date." My lawyer nodded, as if noting a useful piece of information. "Then do you remember the name of your son's therapist?" Linda opened her mouth, then closed it. There were several. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. The lawyer continued, as calm as someone reading a grocery list. "Miss Whitmore, are you aware that Alex has a severe peanut allergy?" Linda frowned, looking genuinely confused. "He was never allergic as a child." Alex's shoulders beside me suddenly stiffened. My lawyer didn't need to raise his voice. "Miss Whitmore, would it surprise you to know that all of Alex's school reports and medical records have listed that allergy consistently for over a decade?" Linda's gaze flicked to her lawyer, searching for a lifeline. It was too late. The judge leaned forward slightly, her eyes growing sharper. Then Alex was called up. The boy stepped onto the stand without a hint of hesitation, not rushing, not lagging. He sat down, adjusted the microphone with careful hands, and looked up at the judge. "Please state your name," the judge said. "Alex Whitmore," he replied. His voice was firm and clear. Linda smiled at him, a hopeful smile that didn't reach her eyes. Alex didn't look at her. He looked straight at the judge. "I brought records," he said simply. He presented a stack of documents organized with extreme logic. Sketches with date and time notes, transcripts of phone calls, and paintings recording his emotions. My lawyer guided him. "Alex, can you explain why you kept these things?" "Yes," Alex said, "because consistency is the most important thing." Linda grew restless in her chair. Mike began whispering urgently to their lawyer. Alex continued unfazed. "On March 15, 2017, at 2:32 p.m., my mother left a voicemail saying she didn't want the responsibility and requested no further contact." Linda's lawyer jumped up. "Objection. This is eavesdropped information." The judge raised her hand. "Objection overruled. A voicemail left for a guardian is valid evidence." Alex read those lines without any emotion. No bitterness, no anger, just the naked truth. Date, time, content, all meticulously recorded. The room was pin-drop silent. Linda turned as white as a sheet. Next came the emails she had written. You chose this path, Jack. Don't blame me. Then page after page. Linda began shaking her head. That's out of context. Alex tilted his head slightly, looking at her with the eyes of an artist, peeling away a layer of fake pigment. There is no context that makes the sentence, "Don't call me again unless there's money involved," sound like support. My lawyer stepped forward and placed one final document on the judge's bench. Your Honor, this is a copy of the relinquishment of parental rights document signed by Miss Whitmore years ago, fully notarized at the Hope Center. I felt my eyes sting. It wasn't because she was losing. It was because my son was standing there, calm, measured, and unbreakable. The judge looked at Linda, her voice stern. Miss Whitmore, do you dispute the authenticity of these documents? Linda opened her mouth, then closed it. She glanced at Mike, but he had already turned his face away. No, she whispered. I do not. The silence that followed felt heavy. It was the silence of justice finally being served. When the verdict was delivered, it happened quickly. The judge dismissed all of Linda and Mike's claims to the assets in custody, ordered them to pay all legal fees, and issued a stern warning against any future meritless lawsuits. Linda stared blankly ahead as the gavel fell. Mike stood up, shoved his chair back with a loud clatter, and walked straight out the door. It was over. Walking down the courthouse steps, the cold air hit my face like the taste of freedom. I took a deep breath, and for the first time in weeks, it felt like my chest wasn't being crushed. Linda ran after us, reaching out toward Alex. Sweetie, I'm sorry. I was wrong. Can you ever forgive me? Alex stopped and turned to look at her. No rage, no bitterness, just a chillingly calm detachment. You ask as if it's something I owe you, he said, but you never gave me anything I could carry with me to turn into forgiveness. Mike turned back, his voice shouting with resentment. Blood is still blood. No matter what, I'm still his biological father. I turned, my gaze ice cold as I looked him in the eye. Blood gives you a beginning, but it was my sweat, my tears, and my sleepless nights that gave him a home. Mike's mouth hung open, speechless. Linda stood there, her shoulders tensed as if trying to maintain some final shred of dignity. Then she turned and walked away without another word. The click of her heels on the stone pavement grew distant and eventually vanished into the crowd. No tears, no farewells. Only an empty space remained, where responsibility had finally caught up with those who ran from it. Alex turned to me. You okay, Dad? He asked, his eyes full of concern. I nodded, my throat tight. Yeah, I said, and this time I really meant it. I'm okay. We're okay. The tide was receding that spring. The sea was vast and still, flowing past our coastal town as if it had all the time in the world to heal every wound. Do you feel a sense of triumph now that the truth has finally conquered the lies? Congratulate Jack and Alex by leaving a heart in the comments. A week after the verdict, Alex and I took a walk along the coastal path just after sunrise. The air was cold enough to make my face tingle, the kind of cold that makes you feel alert rather than exhausted. I carried 2 coffees from the gas station, black for me, way too much cream for him. At first, we didn't say much. That's always been our way of life. Silence wasn't something to fear. It was a space where we both knew how to stand firm. Across the water, the early dawn light hit the rusted railway bridge, turning it a vibrant orange for a few seconds before the light shifted again. I watched Alex as he walked half a step ahead of me, hands buried deep in his coat pockets, unconsciously counting his steps. Do you ever think about her? I asked. He stopped. Not abruptly, but a thoughtful pause, as if considering a question that deserved the most honest answer. Yes, he said, but not the way I used to. What do you mean? He looked out at the distant sea. I don't wonder why she left anymore. I just realized that she chose to disappear forever. I nodded. That made perfect sense. We sat down on a bench near a bend in the path. A jogger blurred past us with headphones on, lost in their own world. Somewhere behind us, a freight train whistled long and low, the sound rolling across the water like a piece of memory. I took a sip of my coffee and winced. Bitter. And too hot. Gas station coffee never changes. I keep thinking, I said, about all the times I almost messed everything up. Alex glanced at me. You didn't. I came close, though, I said. The way I almost posted everything online. The way I wanted to scream and fight her with noise instead of the truth. He pondered that. Because you were angry. I was more afraid than anything, I corrected. There's a big difference. Fear makes people act in a rush. Anger makes people lose control. He nodded once. Anger is loud, fear is busy, but the truth is patient. I smiled despite everything. You ought to be writing fortune cookie inserts. The corner of Alex's mouth twitched. For him, that was a beaming smile. We sat there for a long time, watching the tide roll in just as it had for years. Same beach, same town, but the weight on my chest felt completely different. That weekend, Alex asked me if we could borrow the community center hall on Tuesday nights. For what? I asked. A meeting, he said. For kids like me and their parents. I blinked. You want to run a support group? Yes, he said simply. The community helped us. Now it's my turn to help them. And so we did. We set up folding chairs, brewed terrible coffee, and taped a cardboard box labeled donations by the door. Alex talked about routines and using art as a weapon to communicate with the world. I talked about legal paperwork and patience, about the choice to stay when walking away would have been so much easier. The first night, 6 people showed up. The second week, 12. A month later, that number grew to 25. A month after that, Alex took a portion of the proceeds from his symmetry collection to start a small scholarship fund. Nothing flashy, just enough to ensure kids like him could have the best art supplies without having to beg anyone. When people asked why he didn't go bigger, why he didn't join national programs or do big media tours, he just shook his head. This is where I live, he said. These are the people who helped me. That is enough. One evening, as we were locking up the hall, I finally asked the question that had been sitting in my chest since the courtroom. How did you know? I asked. Back then, why did you tell me to just let her talk? Alex tucked the keys into his pocket and looked at me. Because, he said carefully, liars are always trying to explain themselves. They need more words to cover up the truth. And people telling the truth, they don't need to do that. They just let time and consistency prove it. I felt a sense of peace wash over me. All those years, I thought staying meant having to do more, work harder, fix everything with my calloused hands. It turns out, staying also means knowing when not to interrupt the truth. It's knowing when to stand still and let what is right prove itself. Linda never came back. No apologies, no second attempts, and that was perfectly fine. Because family isn't about who shows up when there's a pile of money on the table. 3 months after the verdict, an unstamped, unaddressed letter slid into the mailbox. In the cabin of my old truck late at night, under a dim yellow light, I opened it. The handwriting was shaky, the ink smeared in places like fallen tears. I was once abandoned in the very place I left Alex. I thought I didn't deserve to be a mother. I was wrong. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just wanted to say, at least, I gave him his talent for art. That gene came from me, Jack. I read the last line, my palms slick with cold sweat. Then I gently tore it into tiny pieces, letting them fall into the trash like a final silent conclusion. I went back inside. Alex was sitting by the window, golden sunlight washing over his hands as he worked with warm hues, wild orange, sunny yellow, and deep crimson. He looked up at me and smiled, a smile no longer haunted by fear. He pushed a new painting toward me, a depiction of him and me holding hands, but in the far corner, there was a faint, blurred silhouette of a woman with wings. I realized then that the greatest justice wasn't the court's verdict. It was the fact that those cold colors would never touch his world again. 6 months later, in a small but light-filled new home, the painting 2 pairs of feet, my large feet in old sandals and Alex's small feet, walking together down a long path filled with flowers, was hung prominently by the front door. We opened an exhibition titled Family, Strokes of Destiny. The centerpiece was called Where I Began, depicting my rough, calloused hands transforming into a warm background that embraced Alex's small hand holding a brush. During the opening, a young couple stood for a long time in front of that painting. The woman wiped away tears. The man squeezed her hand tightly. They had a young son with them, sitting in the corner of the room, drawing on a sheet of paper spread across the floor. "Thank you," the woman whispered to me. "Thank you for showing us that we aren't alone." I only managed a nod, unable to speak through the lump in my throat. Family are the people who are still there when the lights are off, when the bills are due, and when no one else is watching. If our story touched your heart, If you've ever been the person who chose to stay when walking away was much easier, I hope you take a second to be proud of that strength in yourself. Share this story with those who need understanding, those who are struggling, and those wondering if they are strong enough. And if you want to hear more authentic, everyday stories of human connection like this, consider subscribing to the channel. Some truths don't need to be shouted. They just need time to be seen. Family is a choice, not a biological imposition. Thank you for walking with Jack and Alex until this very moment.